Hello, welcome to Cracking the Code, an overview of ISBT 128 product codes, an ICBA webinar. My name is Karen Moniz. I am the Technical Director at ICBA, also known as ICCBBA. You can say either one. And today we're going to delve into information about how the product coding works within ISBT 128. So our agenda includes two of our information standards specialists, Ryan Ruiz and Alex Garlets. Ryan will be speaking to us about the ISBT 128 standard terminology and then how that feeds into the ISBT 128 product code data structure. How do those things work together? He'll then be followed by Alex Garlets, who will be describing to us the product lookup program, a handy dandy tool that we have on our website that helps you look for codes that you might need for your business operations and also includes how to ask for codes that you're not finding. That will be followed by a brief session on ISBT 128 clinical trials product description codes. We'll then have a question and answer session where hopefully we'll answer most, if not all, of your questions. And that will be followed up with a survey and additional resources for all attendees. So, how do you ask questions? On the top right-hand portion of your screen, you'll see an arrow that will be facing to the left. The arrow on this screenshot is facing to the right because it's already been clicked and the door is open and you can see the Q&A box there. Okay. If you want to close that so you can have a bigger view of the slides, just close it. When you want to ask a question, pop it open. The first time you pop it open, it should ask you, permission to use your name, that sort of thing. Betty Perez will be monitoring the questions as they come in. She may be asking you clarifying questions to make sure that we get your question correct, and then she will in turn relay the questions to our speakers during the question and answer session. Once again, if we don't get to all of the questions, we will get to them in writing after the fact. Okay. But before we get started, a little background on ICBA. You can say ICCBBA, you can say ICBA. Either one is perfectly fine. Our organization was established in 1994 to both develop and maintain the ISBT 128 standard for terminology, globally unique identification, labeling, and electronic data exchange for medical products of human origin. Now, we'll be using the term MPHO to refer to medical products of human origin throughout the sessions because it's quite a mouthful. And if you're attending this session, we hope that you have a basic idea about what a medical product of human origin is, something that comes from a human being to be used for a medical purpose in either the same or different human being. So, medical products of human origin. We have a wide variety of standards and implementation guides at this point in time. We do not develop those in a vacuum. They're developed with the aid of volunteers. We have absolutely marvelous volunteers that serve on our many technical advisory groups. To learn more about them, please see our website. ICBA is indeed an international, nonprofit, non-state actor, and we are supported by user fees. A little bit more about ISBT 128 itself. ISBT 128 is the international standard for the transfer of information associated with medical products of human origin. The ability to uniquely identify something on a global basis, to have standardized terminology, to have a standardized mechanism for division identifiers, provides the ability to globally uniquely identify any medical product of human origin labeled with the standard. This is essential for biovigilance of MPHO because without that standard terminology and globally unique identification, biovigilance becomes very difficult to pursue on a grand scale. So what are these images here for? These images are a reminder to me to tell you a little bit about the origin of the standard itself. During Desert Storm, and that's the image of the USS Comfort there, one of the ships that medically supported the area during the time, blood was pouring into the region from all over the world. And because there was no clear single system for globally unique donation identification, the possibility existed and situations did occur where you could have 2 units of blood with the same exact donation identification number. Now that's kind of scary. So the International Society for Blood Transfusion, ISBT, their working party, helped to launch the ISBT 128 standard, and it was quickly recognized between the ISBT Working Party on Automation and the AABBIS committee that an organization was needed to develop and maintain this standard. And hence here we are, close to 30 years later, still growing the standard across the spectrum of MPHO. One last note from me, and this is the information environment model. We'll be referring to this throughout our sessions. And you can see that the basis of virtually everything we do is based on standardized terminology. Hence, this is our first webinar on product description codes that I built from the standardized terminology. And so without any further ado, I'm going to turn the session over to one of our marvelous information standard specialists, Ryan Ruiz, and he's going to begin his session of the talk. A reminder, though, to ask questions throughout. Betty will be moderating the question and answer box and potentially asking you clarifying questions on your question. And then we'll have our question and answer session with both of the speakers once Alex is done speaking.
Thank you, Karen, for that introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Reese, and I'm an Information Standards Specialist with ICC-BPA. Today, within my portion of this presentation, I'll cover over key topics like the ISBT 128 standard terminology and the ISBT 128 product code data structure. Now, some subtopics within standard term will be the information environment, the differences between classes, modifiers, and attribute values, and how to navigate to the latest version of the standard terminology document on our website. Now, you're going to see this slide a few more times as we go through this presentation, and that's just to keep everyone aware of which key topic we're currently covering and when we'll be transitioning to the next. Now, I want to reintroduce this ISBT 128 information environment model that Karen provided earlier. This model describes how ISBT 128 organizes its information to achieve standardization for both labeling and electronic messaging for medical products of human origin, or MPHOs. Now, if you notice at the bottom of this pyramid lies the standardized terminology. Without clarity at this level, further attempts at standardization will be lost. Therefore, ICBA ensures that internationally agreed upon standardized terminology is defined at the required level of granularity. Now, what does that mean? So you see we have this term leukodepleted, which means the removal of leukocytes from a blood component. However, there are different ways in order to perform this action, resulting in varying amounts that can be identified as leukodepleted. Therefore, to capture these variations, standardized terminology and their values are required. In order to gain an agreement on standard terminology at this necessary level of detail, it requires careful analysis and robust consensus. Now, here's just a few examples from this table as far as their values and descriptions. The complete list can be found within our ISBT 128 standard terminology document for medical products of human origin, or ST002, which is a core document and will be referenced many times throughout our standard. Before we continue, not only again we'll be talking on standardized terminology, but a little bit later we'll talk about data elements, reference tables, and data structures. Within ISBT 128 standard terminology, terminology is categorized within its appropriate MPHO groups. Right here on this left-hand side, I have an illustration of that product categorization, and I'm using blood components. So classes provide that first step in product categorization. They provide a general understanding about the product. For blood components, the next step in product categorization would be modifiers. Modifiers like washed, freeze-dried, cryopreserved, apheresis identify the process that occurred. The following step in product categorization is attribute groups. Now, attribute groups are general categories used to describe detailed characteristics about the product. An example of a detailed characteristic would be their attribute values. Now, specifically for this attribute group, which is system integrity focuses on the microbiological integrity of the product. Now, the default value, every attribute group will have default values. The default value specifically for system integrity will be closed. And if the system integrity of the product was compromised, then we would select the value open. Now, I want to draw your attention to this dashed line here. So yes, modifiers would provide the next step in product categorization for blood components. However, the use of modifiers is not always the case for all MPHO groups, specifically tissue. Now, some time ago, modifiers for tissue products were discontinued within product descriptions, and those existing modifiers like frozen, freeze-dried, cryopreserved were then fashioned into attribute values and stored within the appropriate attribute group. For blood and cell therapy products, one attribute value that is mandatory when submitting product descriptions is your core conditions. Now, core conditions is a single element that consists of 3 items: an anticoagulant, a nominal collection volume, and a storage temp. Here on the right-hand side, I have a table of existing core conditions within current ISBT 128 product descriptions. The point of this table is just to show you that not only do we have this combination that includes one attribute value, but the abbreviations of these values, such as CPD and refrig. For the complete description of refrig, we'll see within ST002 is outlined here with the abbreviation and definition. Again, with abbreviations, we have this term NS, which means not specified. Now, this is not specified as far as encoded information. Therefore, information about the anticoagulant will not appear in the product description. However, it could appear with an additional labeled text or accompanying documentation. Now, just because we have this ISBT 128 standard terminology available does not mean that we can combine it with any class and attribute values. Here I have an example of the attribute group infection, which provides information about specific disease history of the donor. Now, if you look here at the bottom, this attribute group is to be used only with the class convalescent plasma. Now, examples of attribute values found within this group can be seen here, which is COVID-19, COVID-19 high titer, and low titer. So if we receive a product description like red blood cells and COVID-19, we know right away within our technical group, we can be able to identify that this combination shouldn't exist based on ISBT 128 standard terminology, because we know that the class convalescent plasma only works with these attributes. Receiving this product description will alert our technical team to contact that requester and seek additional clarification so that we can find a product description that fits their needs. Now, earlier I provided information on product categorization. Again, we'll start with classes, modifiers, attribute groups, and values. Now I just want to show you how that information is presented within ST002. So here we have the common name, which is red blood cells, and you notice that there's a one-to-one kind of link here with the ISBT 128 PDC database name. So red cells, and this is how it's going to look in the database as well as when you build product descriptions. But I wanted to draw your attention to this last one here. So yes, the complete common name has residual leukocyte content spelled out. However, the database name and the name that you'll see within product descriptions will be reslu less than 5e6. I just wanted to bring this to your attention and keep you aware. So as you build product descriptions later on with Alex through the ISBT 128 product lookup program, you know exactly what these mean and where you can reference them within ST002. Now, with terminology over time may be redundant or we may notice an error. In that case, we would retire the terminology and place it in section 14. We don't get rid of it. We just hold it there because we understand that inventories may have products labeled with this retired terminology. And this helps for backward traceability and identifying that complete product description. Now, as you navigate to ST002 and you notice, hey, we don't see a class, modifier, attribute value that kind of captures what we're doing, you can always request new terminology by contacting support at isbt128.org. The latest version of the ISBT 128 standard terminology can be found on our website. If you go to our main webpage and see this red ribbon here, you'll see the technical library tab. If you hover over that, a drop-down menu will appear which presents the standard terminology. Now, when you click on that button, it'll redirect you to this page here where you'll see the most updated version, a downloadable PDF, and a version control sheet identifying changes within that year. Now, version control sheet seen here will identify the section of where the change occurred, the change that happened, and the rationale behind it. Great. Now that I covered information on the standard terminology, such as the information environment, the differences between class modifiers and attribute values in regards to product descriptions, and then how to navigate to the latest version of the standard terminology document on our website, I want to cover the ISBT 128 product code data structure, where this information is held within the standard, the differences between data identifiers versus data content, and the differences in MPHO groups. Now, before I dig into the content, I want to go over some frequently asked questions about our data structure. So like, what is an ISBT 128 data structure? Well, an ISBT 128 data structure is a mechanism which presents multiple data elements within a structured format. They specify context and structure, helping users understand the elements required to properly display and interpret essential information. Therefore, data structures must be clear and unambiguous. In short, they define a structured way to present information. Next is, what are data structures composed of? Well, data structures are composed of two fixtures. one being the data identifiers and the other being the data content. Now, specifically for the ISBT 128 product code data structure, the data identifiers for this one would be equals less than. Now, we're going to dig in a little bit more into the product code data content a little bit later through these slides, but just know this is just a placeholder for values. And again, we're going to touch base as we move forward. So the next question that we often get is, what are the role of data identifiers? Now, data identifiers allow a system to accurately interpret information. The facility system software should analyze these data identifiers and ensure that the barcode entered is the correct information needed for interpretation. This works by verifying the length and format of the encoded information, which is specified within the ISBT 128 Standard Technical Specification ST001, which is another core document. Now, another question that we often get is, where is this information about the product code found? Again, going back to our main web page, you see that red ribbon. You go again back to the technical library, hover on it, you'll see that item which is technical specification. Click the downloadable PDF and you'll reference section 2.4.3 for more information on the ISBT 128 product code data structure. Great, so let's dig into the product code data content. The first 5 characters of the product code data content that we see here, again, these are just placeholders. We're going to give examples of what information would be populated in this area. But the first 5 characters of the product code would be the ISBT 128 product description codes, or ISBT 128 PDCs. Some examples here with blood, cell therapy, and tissue are housed within the ISBT 128 product code database. In order to gain access to this database, you must go onto our website, enter your website credentials, as this is a password-restricted location. Now, with this first position here, we use this to identify the type of product. And here's a quick table here. We use E to represent blood components, S for cell therapy, and T for tissue. Now, the full listings of MPHO types and what they're assigned can be found within ST001, section 2.4.3. Currently, for blood components, we use values E, B. We won't be moving to F until we've completely exhausted the E value. On our website, you'll see the ISBT 128 Product Description Code database. This database webpage will identify the latest version, a downloadable access file, a text file including all ISBT 128 Product Description Code values, and a version control sheet identifying changes within that year. Just like the standard terminology document, the version control sheet can identify what table the change occurred in, what change actually happened, and what was the rationale of such change. Here at the bottom, you'll see a snippet of the ISBT 128 Product Description Code database, where we identify the ISBT 128 PDC, the product description, code date, retire date, and then a product formula. Now, this product formula is important because we see here that each value within the database has its own unique identifier. So for red blood cells, we see that the class here is C0002. For the attribute value, specifically for this core condition combination, would be this identifier here. Now, the 6th character of the product code indicates a type of collection. This is applicable to blood or cell therapy products. In this position, we use single character values like capital V to identify volunteer homologous, or lowercase s to appear paid source. If no value are not specified, you can always select 0 within that position. This is a shortened table of reference table RT008, which can be found within ST001, our ISBT 128 Standard Technical Specification document. For other MPHO products like tissue, the 6th character of the product code will correspond to the division code, allowing for up to 999 divisions to be captured. Therefore, for tissue products, when T is represented in this first position, the type of collection is not captured. And we'll go more into that within the division section in the next few slides. The 7th and 8th positions of the ISBT 128 product code data structure represent divisions for MPHO groups like blood and cell therapy. So if you have no divisions for the product, the values are simple 0, 0. However, primary divisions will be captured within that 7th position using capital letters, A, B, and so on, and you have up to 26 possibilities. Now, subdivisions of BO, you'll see here, are captured within the 8th position with lowercase values like A, B, and so on. Again, up to 26 possible divisions. However, for tissue products, it does not use that 6th character to identify type of collection. They use these 3 positions to identify product divisions. You'll see that numerical characters are represented in this location going from right to left. Now, I believe I've covered my portion of this presentation. I've talked about the differences between data identifiers versus data content, covered where this information about the ISBT 128 product code data structure, where that information is found, and the differences of how MPHO groups affect the presentation of the ISBT 128 product code data structure. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague Alex Garlets, who will be presenting information on the ISBT 128 product lookup program and ISBT 128 clinical trials.
Thank you, Ryan. Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Garlets, and I'm going to be covering the third and fourth key topics of this webinar. First, I'm going to discuss the ISBT 128 online product lookup program, how our registered users can use this program to conduct product description code searches, as well as submit new product description code requests, and I'll be covering the aids that we have available that complement this tool. Following that, I'll transition into our final key topic, ISBT 128 clinical trials PDCs, and discuss how these are different than our internationally standardized PDCs and how your facility can go about requesting these specific clinical trials codes. So, to begin with our third key topic, one of the main benefits that your facility will receive following its registration with ICBA is you will gain access to the password protected areas of our website. And within this password protected area, you will find our online lookup program. So, to access that program, you will first need to navigate to isbt128.org. And once you're at that page, you will want to log in to your website member account. You can do so by clicking this red button found here. This will launch a secondary window asking you to input your email and password for your account. After you've entered those, select Log In, and you'll know that you've successfully logged into your account when your name now populates this red button as opposed to the default member text. Now, if you are viewing this webinar and you do not currently have a website member account, you can find instructions for how to register for one by navigating to the Registration and Licensing drop-down menu and selecting the Website Member Accounts option. But with that being said, getting back to the online lookup program, again, you'll want to ensure that you're logged into your account and then hover your mouse over the Lookup Tools drop-down menu and select Find Product Information. This is going to navigate you to the Lookup Tools homepage, where at the top, you'll be greeted with some PDF instructions outlining how to conduct searches, how to export searches, as well as how to submit new product description code requests through the online tool. Just beneath those PDFs embedded on the webpage, you will have a video that outlines these same instructions, providing you with a visual of the online lookup program's interface and use. And our last resource to complement the online lookup tool, continuing to scroll down, you will find the downloadable version of the lookup program. You can download this file directly onto your device by selecting the highlighted text here. And this is a Microsoft Excel macro-enabled file that'll enable you to conduct product description code searches in the same way that you would be able to on our online tool. However, this downloadable tool will allow you to conduct your searches without requiring you to have an internet connection. Now, with that being said, we do strongly recommend to our users who use this downloadable version of the tool that they re-download this file prior to each instance of its use. And our reasoning for that is because we update our databases and subsequently these lookup tools roughly once per month. So to ensure that you have the latest terminology and product description codes to choose from when conducting your searches, you'll want to ensure that you have the latest version downloaded. All right. But with that said, if we continue to scroll down, we will reach the interface for the ISBT 128 online lookup program. This interface is split into two separate sections, allowing you to conduct a search by a PDC or to conduct a search by a product description. So I'll begin with the top section here in conducting searches by PDCs. And let me provide an example to illustrate when this tool would be useful to you. For example, let's say I work at a facility and my facility has just received a product labeled with the 8-character ISBT 128 product code S4102400. And my facility would like to know exactly what the product description is that corresponds to that product code that we've received. Well, thanks to Ryan's explanation in the product code data structure section of this webinar, we know that the first 5 characters of that 8-character product code that we've received is going to correspond to the product description code. So we can enter those 5 characters into our search bar, and we will be able to discover the associated product description relatively quickly. So for this example, we would enter S4102, and when we conduct the search, we would quickly find that the product description for the product that we've received is as follows. Now, when you do have a result found, you'll get this green box. Inside this green box, you will have the PDC that you've entered reiterated, and its associated description will be populated adjacent to it. You can copy both this PDC and its description quickly onto your clipboard by selecting this clipboard icon here, and you can then paste that information onto a file as you see fit. Now, when conducting searches by a known or given product description code, you'll need to be very precise in the PDC that you enter. For example, if you were to enter the entirety of the product code that you had received, you'll get the following error notifying you that the code that you enter must be 5 characters. And that's because this tool requires that you only input the PDC. Also, if you accidentally enter a PDC that is less than 5 characters, you'll get a similar error message notifying you that you have to enter a 5-character code. The only other type of result that you will get when conducting a search by PDC is the following. If you enter the incorrect character, that could lead to this following error message popping up. This error message is signifying to you that although this is a 5-character PDC, it does fit the 5-character requirement. This specific PDC is not defined within the ISBT 128 PDC database, so this lookup tool will not be able to give you a result. And honestly, that's the extent of conducting a search by a known or given product description code. You'll either be notified that the code that you entered does not currently exist within our database. If the code does exist within our database, you'll get the result found as well as the description provided, or you'll get a notification notifying you that you must enter a 5-character PDC in order to conduct your search. So with that, I'm going to move on to the second portion of this online lookup program in conducting searches by product description. So our users will find that this portion of the lookup program will be useful when you are able to describe your product to a desired level of granularity, but you aren't sure if there is an ISBT 128 PDC that fits that exact description that you've specified. So in order to discover if there is a PDC that fits that description, we simply need to build our product description, and this lookup tool will provide us with any PDCs that potentially fit what we are looking for. So for this one, I'm going to use a CAR T cells product description for my example, and I'm going to be building this product description to my predetermined level of granularity that I want to describe this product. So to begin, I'm going to select the category, in this case, cellular therapy. Selecting that causes my subcategory drop-down menu to appear, and I will need to select a subcategory. Now, this might seem a little bit redundant for the time being. However, this is a bit of built-in future-proofing to the standard, so we simply just need to select the subcategory available to us. In my case, it'll be cellular therapy again. Following that, the class and attribute group drop-down menus will appear, and we are going to continue by selecting our class. Now, you should notice right away that there is not a CAR T cells class that is defined within ISBT 128. And you might be wondering, well, how can we build a CAR T cells product description if there isn't a CAR T cells class? Well, thanks to the guidance that was provided from our CTC LAG, or our Cellular Therapy Coding and Labeling Advisory Group, within ISBT 128, CAR T cells are to be labeled using the T cells apheresis class, so I'll apply that here. And they are to include the genetically modified yes attribute. So in order to follow that guidance, I need to apply that attribute, and I can do so by selecting the attribute group. In this case, it will be genetically modified as the appropriate attribute group for me to select, and then I can select the corresponding attribute value. Now notice For the attribute values that are selected in my description, they will be populated here on this right-hand gray window. You'll notice adjacent to the attributes that are selected, there is a yellow trash can. If I were to select this, this will remove the attribute that I have selected if I made a mistake. Or another way of removing a selected attribute is you can simply select a different attribute within that same attribute group, and you'll notice that this will overwrite your previous selection. So with this, you'll also notice that you can only select one attribute value for each attribute group when describing your product. All right, so I followed my CTC-LAG guidance. Now I want to continue specifying more information about my product. So I'm going to make a reference back to something that Ryan mentioned earlier in this webinar, in that cellular therapy product descriptions are required to carry their core conditions information within their descriptions. So I should include my product's core conditions. To do that, selecting the attribute group window again, this time selecting CT core, and I can select the appropriate attribute value. For my CAR T cells, I want to say that my anticoagulant is none. My nominal collection volume, XX, there's no information regarding the nominal collection volume encoded. And my storage temperature is less than or equal to -150 C. So I'll go ahead and select that. That'll now populate in this gray window. You'll notice this all-inclusive results list down here. If we scroll down just a little bit further down on the interface, you'll see all of the potentially matching PDCs for the description that we currently have specified. So again, you'll want to continue specifying until you reach your desired level of granularity, and then we can determine if there is an appropriate code to use. So I am going to continue specifying my product's description. I've stated that it's at a -150 C storage temp. I want to specify that this product is indeed cryopreserved. I could do that by going back to the attribute groups, selecting my modification attribute group, and selecting cryopreserved. Now, I want to specify my cryoprotectant. Again, back to the attribute group menu, and I select the appropriate attribute group and the appropriate attribute value for my product. In this case, I'm going to select 10% DMSO. Now, I have two final pieces of information that I want to include within my product's description. I want to also include that there is a blood component from a third-party donor present, so I'll include that attribute. And lastly, I want to include that this product is cultured. So again, back to the attribute group, cultured, yes. Now, this is my desired level of granularity that I need to describe my particular product. So now we can scroll down on the interface, and we'll notice that I happen to have an exact match found for what I described. So if I were to be labeling this exact product, I would use the PDC S2129. Again, just as before, if you want to copy this PDC and its associated description onto your clipboard quickly, you can select this icon here. Now, if we continue scrolling down, you'll notice in this all-inclusive results list, we have my exact match on the top, but there are also other potentially fitting matches. If you were to decide that you wanted to continue providing granularity in describing your product, you could continue to do so. For example, let's say you wanted to add that your product is enriched, and let's say it's CD3 enriched. You add that to your selected attributes, and your all-inclusive results list will update. Now we reached a point where there are no potentially fitting matches for what we've described within the ISBT 128 PDC database. So if this is indeed the PDC that I would need in order to appropriately describe my product, what I could do is I could use this blue Submit Product Request button, and this will launch the Submit Product Request form. This will require me to input my facility information and contact information. This form will also reiterate the category, subcategory, class, and attributes that you have selected while building your product's description. And after you have input the required information at the top of the form, the submit button will become usable, And you could select that and submit a request for this product description that you have built to be added to the product description code database at a later published date. Now, I do want to take this time to mention that not every single request that we are going to receive through this online form is going to be processed and included in the ISBT 128 PDC database. The reasonings for that will vary, but at a very basic explanation, it was determined that the PDC that was requested was not appropriate for an international code to be assigned to it. So, with that being said, also, if while building your product description, you find that the ISBT 128 standardized terminology is not sufficient in describing your product, then we ask that you please submit a request for new terminology to be added to the ISBT 128 standard. You can submit those requests through our support email, support@isbt128.org. We just ask that these requests come along with accompanying documentation that specifies and illustrates the product and or process that is in need of a new term. Now, with that last point, that is going to transition me into our fourth and final key topic, being ISBT 128 clinical trials PDCs. So, in the past, when clinical trials conducting facilities were utilizing our online lookup program to discover a PDC to apply to their clinical trials product, if they had determined that the ISBT 128 standardized terminology that was available to them was not sufficient in describing their product, rather than submitting a request for new standardized terminology to be added, it was ICBA's guidance that these facilities utilize a local code for their clinical trial product. This, in practice, allowed the facility to still label utilizing ISBT 128 while also providing them the flexibility of being able to label their product using their own proprietary terminology. This, in practice, however, led to the possibility of multiple clinical trials conducting facilities labeling their clinical trials products with similar local codes. And this led to the possibility of PDCs being assigned to clinical trial products that were not globally unique. So, to accommodate this need, ICBA developed the ISBT 128 Clinical Trials PDC database and Clinical Trials PDCs. These PDCs are different than our internationally standardized PDCs in that they are requested by a facility and then allocated by ICBA to that facility. At that point, it then becomes the facility's responsibility to define the PDC that has been allocated to them and the associated label text that would accompany that PDC. These clinical trials product description codes in practice still provide the clinical trials conducting facility the ability to label utilizing the ISBT 128 format. As you can see on the screen, the utilization of a clinical trials PDC is going to follow a similar format to the blood and cellular therapy PDCs in ISBT 128 product codes. So with that, if you are interested in requesting clinical trials product description codes for your facility, you can do so by navigating back to the ISBT128.org site. And going back to the home page here, you'll again want to ensure that you are logged into your member's account. And after that, you will hover your mouse over the technical library drop-down menu and select the Request a PDC option. On this page, you will find instructions outlining how to request a clinical trials PDC and what exactly these clinical trials PDCs are intended for. But if you continue scrolling down, you will find the request form for these clinical trials PDCs, where you will be able to input your information and submit a request for clinical trials PDCs to be allocated to your facility. Now, while we are here, I do want to mention that requested clinical trials PDCs only come in batches of 10. So when you do request these PDCs, please ensure that you request a multiple of 10. Now, if you would like more information regarding clinical trials PDCs and their use, we did just recently produce a video outlining that exact topic. You can find that video on our YouTube channel, or if you navigate on our website to the ISBT 128 support drop-down menu and the presentations option, selecting that will navigate you to this page here, and you can select the pre-recorded videos tile. This will navigate you down to our videos where you will find the clinical trials product description code video ready for viewing. with that, that is our final key topic. So just to give a brief summary of what was discussed today, Ryan discussed ISBT 128 standardized terminology, as well as the ISBT 128 product code data structure. I covered the ISBT 128 online product lookup program, and we just finished discussing ISBT 128 clinical trials PDCs. All right, so now at this time, I would like to invite Betty onto the stage, and we will begin our Q&A session here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everyone. My name is Betty Perez. I am the Executive Assistant at ICC BBA, as well as the moderator for this webinar. At this time, we will start the Q&A portion of the webinar. So if you have not done so already, please submit your questions to the Q&A section within the live stage menu. In the meantime, please note that after the webinar, we will be distributing an email with the recording, further information, and we will also be distributing a survey to solicit feedback so that we may improve future webinars and future educational content. At this time, we will now bring all speakers back on the stage to answer the questions we received. Thank you all. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. And I'm going to go ahead and start with the user questions. Ryan, is there an identifier to show that a red cell is a directed donation similar to the identifier for autologous units?
Yes, right. So for blood products in the product code, there's that sixth position. Now that sixth position identifies collection type or type of collection. Within the standard technical specification document, reference table RT008, it holds holds these values that go in that sixth position as well as the descriptions for it. So if you look at that table, you'll see characters like capitalized D, which focuses on volunteer directed, and then as well as the numerical value number 2, which is for directed recipient use only. So that's one place where we can identify it's for directed. The second location would be within the ABO data structure, the first 2 characters of that data structure. And that can be referenced, same document, standard technical specification, but it's reference table RT005, which uses numerical values just to identify the ABO and RHD blood groups as well as the intended use. So autologous, directed, designated, and so on.
Okay, thank you so much. Ryan, we also have another question for you. What is the difference between a product code and a product description code?
Great. Yeah. So I covered I covered both of them in my portion of this presentation. The product code, it's the 8 characters within the ISBT 128 product code data structure. Now, of those 8 characters, the first 5 characters are the ISBT 128 product description code, or PDC. So again, we have the longer look here, which is the 8-character product code, and then the data element within that product code would be the ISBT PDC. Now, those PDCs are housed within our ISBT 120 product description code database. And now, again, so that focuses on the first 5 elements. Now, the 6 for blood and cell therapy, specifically in this case, that 6th character, again, identifies the type of collection. This is where I'm differentiating between the 2, product code, product description code. That 6th character identifies the type of collection, while for blood and cell therapy, the 7th and 8th positions show product divisions, right, like I explained earlier. But that 6th position does not always identify type of collection for all MPHO groups, like for tissue. For example, instead of the 6th character identifying type of collection, we use that 6th character to then add to the product division for tissue products. So the difference, again, between product code versus product description code is that the product code is the 8 characters of that data structure, that ISBT 128 data structure, while the PDC is just the 5-character data element within it.
Thank you, Ryan. Alex, are product codes which have been retired identified as such in the online product lookup tool?
Yeah, thank you for that question. They are indeed. So when you're utilizing the online lookup program, if you enter a 5-character PDC that is retired, or if you are building a product description that is also retired, it will notify you in the green result found box that you saw while we were going through our presentation today.
Thank you. We have another question for Ryan. Ryan, is it necessary to include the collection type within the full product code data structure?
That depends really on the MPHO type. Like I mentioned just a second ago, for blood and cell therapy, yes, that 6th character identifying the type of collection is absolutely necessary. But if the facility wishes not to provide any information, such as like some common ones is capitalized V for volunteer, they can use the element 0, which means null or not specified. But again, this differs for MPHO types because, again, tissues doesn't use that 6th character to identify type of collection, so it wouldn't be necessary there.
Thank you, Ryan. We have a question on the core conditions. Alex, what are the core conditions for ISBT 128 product descriptions, and what does the XX in the core conditions mean?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for that question. So this is something that we briefly touched on, each of us, while we were going through our topics today. But just to kind of make it a little clear for everyone, our core conditions are going to be the anticoagulant that is present with your product in the first position. The second position is going to signify your nominal collection volume for your product. Now, when you have XX in that second position, that's going to signify that there is no information encoded regarding the nominal collection volume for your product. And then your third character position for your core conditions is going to correspond to your product's storage conditions.
I want to dovetail into that just a little bit from my experience at blood centers. And the XX is really a beautiful thing because it's part of the core conditions, and within your BEX system, then you can input the actual volume or the routine volume that then feeds your labeling system so that you do actually get a volume to print out on the label whenever you have this XX in the core conditions.
Thank you, Alex and Karen. Alex, I have another question. I was notified that my requested codes were approved and added to the database, but I don't see them when I try to look them up with the ISBT 128 lookup tool. Is there a lag, or am I doing something wrong?
Sure, thanks for that question, and thanks, Karen, for jumping in there on that last question. For this one here, you're not doing anything wrong. This is something that our users do experience every so often. There is a little bit of a refresh time for our online lookup program to be updated after we have updated our product description code database. Now, with that being said, if you are really antsy and want to see your new PDC immediately, you can download the downloadable version of the online lookup tool that we covered in our webinar today, and you'll be able to find that newly added PDC in that file.
Thank you. I have a question for Ryan now. How are product description code values assigned to the MPHO types?
Thank you. Yeah, so when we receive a request, blood, cell therapy, so on, we already have pre-assigned groups. So for, like I explained earlier, for blood products, we would give them the MPHO identifier, which is E, for cell therapy, S, and tissues, T. So what we do is these are already assigned, and that table can be found within our standard technical specification document, section 2.4.3. And so once we receive a request and we go for this next version, encoding that into the database, these codes just get assigned in sequential order. So if we're at EB120 for that blood PDC, we'll just go in the next order for that next product, which is EB121, and so on.
Thank you, Ryan. Alex, I'm sorry, Ryan, I have another question for you. What is a reference table?
Yeah, of course. Now, a reference table is really, it provides encoding values and their corresponding descriptions or definitions. Now, these encoding values can be found within ISBT 128 data structures. For instance, the first 5 characters of the product code data structure is the ISBT 128 PDC. That ISBT provides like E1234. That's just an encoding value within the data structure, but it can be referenced back into the ISBT 128 product description code database, the product description codes table, where you can look up E1234 and see that assigned product description for that value. So it just kind of gives us that way to identify what these encoding values are.
Thank you, Ryan. I have a question for Alex. How can I ask for new terminology to be added to describe my product?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ISBT 128 standard is constantly growing. So if you find that the current terminology is not sufficient in describing your product, you can submit a request directly through our support email, support@isbt128.org. And just as I mentioned earlier during our presentation, sorry, got a little distracted. And as I mentioned earlier during our presentation, we just asked that when you submit new terminology requests, that you also submit these requests with accompanying documentation that would describe the product or process that is in need of this new terminology.
Thank you very much. Ryan, why are there several tables within the ISBT 128 PDC database?
Yeah, so there's several tables within the database because each table holds specific terms and their unique identifiers. For example, there's a table for classes, modifiers, attribute values, and product descriptions. Not only does these tables show those unique identifiers for those specific items, but it also kind of references and the mapping relationships between these tables and the unique items. Now, what's important for these unique items that are assigned to these terms, for instance, a class like red blood cells is assigned a unique identifier. These unique identifiers are used when building product descriptions and are captured within the product formula. So I kind of mentioned that earlier in the presentation, where if you look at the product description codes table, as you kind of run across, you'll see the product formula where it captures all those unique identifiers, but that kind of just helps us ensure that this product description is unique.
Thank you, Ryan. Alex, what resources can be used when building product descriptions to ensure that submitted PDC requests conform to ISBT 128 standards?
Absolutely, that's a good question. So we recommend definitely to have open the standardized terminology while you are building your product descriptions, as that will help to ensure that you are utilizing terminology that isn't contradictory. Also, any of our documents that we have available in our technical documents section of our website that would correspond to your national jurisdiction should be followed as well.
Okay, now Alex, we have a question regarding clinical trials. How are ISBT 128 clinical trials product description codes different than the standardized ISBT 128 product description codes?
Yeah, of course, this is a good question. So they are different in a sense that clinical trials PDCs do not necessarily need to utilize ISBT 128 standardized terminology. These clinical trials PDCs are going to be defined by the facility that has requested them from ICBA. So these clinical trials PDCs and their definitions are not maintained by us, but they are maintained by the facility that assigned their descriptions.
Sorry about that. Okay, thank you, Alex. We do have a follow-up. The clinical trials subset is a subset of the ISBT 128. If we are an ISBT 128 subscribing facility, is this an additional paid service or is this accessible without an additional fee?
All right, thank you for submitting that. It's another good question. So this is an additional fee that would be for requesting clinical trials PDCs. These are not included within the annual licensing fees. Those are applicable to the those are applicable to the ISBT 128 standardized PDC database. And the clinical trials PDC database is a separate entity and requires separate management. So your one-time nominal fee for your clinical trials products that you're requesting is going to be outlined on just above the request form that we highlighted towards the end of our webinar.
Okay, thank you, Karen. For entities that acquire ISBT 128 labeled products, are there certain software requirements to recognize the data identifiers upon receipt to ensure data is scanned to the appropriate fields? Or is that a programming issue that is required for product attribute recognition?
So it is a programming issue, but I'd like to take a moment to remind everybody that if you are using ISBT 128 in your software, and we certainly hope that you are, that your software vendor is indeed registered with ICBA. In addition to the product code lookup tool, there's a vendor lookup tool. You can look up vendors in any of our categories, and actually we're going to be working on enhancing that tool next year to give you even more information about the vendors. And all the vendors receive a certificate. So please reach out to them to say, hey, do you have your certificate? And that means they're more, communication with us more frequently, that sort of thing. And so it is a software issue, but one that we hope that your software vendor, unless you are a software vendor, then you're deeply embedded in making sure that each field is correct, that works for you.
Thank you. And I understand that we are at the end time. Karen, did you want to go ahead and present the closing information for everyone?
All right, great. I wanted to thank you all for joining us on our journey to improve patient safety by enabling traceability and biovigilance through global unique identification and standardized terminology. That terminology is so important for treating patients. Are you giving them an apple or a pomegranate? It's very important long-term to know exactly what the patient got, and the terminology makes that happen. Please do respond to the survey you will receive about today's webinar and give us your suggestions on how we can improve webinars and what you might want to hear about in the future. If we did not get to your question today, and I know that there were some we didn't quite get to, never fear. We will be sending out a question and answer summary to all participants, and we'll address all the questions at that point. Please do continue to reach out to the help desk and join us at our next webinar, Move Beyond the Label with the MPHO Unique Identifier. This webinar in November will address the uses of the Medical Product of Human Origin Unique Identifier, which is a single unique identifier created from key elements on an MPHO label. This identifier can be used to facilitate accurate electronic transfer of information, including detailed information on red cell antigen typing. In addition to getting to listen to me again, we'll have two guest speakers, Mandy O'Leary from Moffitt and Jeff Brown. Both are current TAG members. Jeff is one of our software vendors, so he knows the ins and outs very well. We hope to see you all there, and I think we're done.